Let me tell y'all something right now, because what I am about to lay out is going to sound like fiction, and every single bit of it is documented. A woman loses a front tooth fighting over a man on camera, tattoos that same man's mugshot across her entire face, gives birth on a live stream, gets arrested at his court hearing with her baby in her arms, runs from a bench warrant while the whole internet watches, and then gets pulled over by police with that very same man years later, like none of it ever happened. And somehow, unbelievably, that is only the surface. Because while the internet has spent 6 years laughing at Chrisean Rock, treating her like a walking meme, a sideshow, the unhinged queen of the crash out, the receipts tell a much darker, much stranger, and honestly much sadder story than anybody wanted to admit. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly how a girl from West Baltimore became the most watched train wreck on the internet, who got paid every single time she bled, and why the people screaming the loudest about protecting her might be the same ones who built the cage around her. Stay right here, because the part nobody talks about is buried in the middle of this timeline, and I am not skipping a single detail. And I want to be upfront about something before we start, because you deserve to know what kind of video this is. This is not a hit piece. This is not a defense. This is the full file, the whole timeline, laid end to end, and by the time we are done, you are going to see a pattern so consistent, so profitable, and so heartbreaking that you will never look at a viral clip of Chrisean Rock the same way again. Now before we get into the chaos, let's establish who we are actually talking about, because the caricature has completely swallowed the person. Chrisean Rock was born Chrisean Malone on March 14th of 2000, in West Baltimore, one of 12 children. 12. Her father was behind bars for most of her childhood. Her mother battled addiction, and the family spent stretches of her youth homeless, bouncing between shelters and relatives while she was still trying to get through school. Think about what that does to a kid. No stability, no safety net, no soft place to land. Just survival, every single day, from the time she could walk. When your first lessons in life are about making it through the night, you do not grow up learning boundaries. You grow up learning combat. Chrisean Rock walked into that house as a 20-year-old with athletic gifts and a short fuse, and she walked out as content. During filming, she got into a physical altercation with Blueface on and off girlfriend and the mother of his older children, Jaden Alexis, and she lost her front tooth. Lost it. On camera, effectively, for a man's affection. And what did she do? She refused to fix it for the longest time. She turned the gap in her smile into a brand, into a signature, into a war wound she wore proudly. And the internet did what the internet does. It laughed. It clipped it. It memed it. Nobody asked what kind of environment pays a young woman to brawl for approval. Nobody asked what it does to a person when the worst moment of her life becomes her audition tape. Chrisean Rock won that competition. Blueface signed her to his label. She dropped her debut single Lonely that same year. And just like that, the most toxic relationship in modern reality television had a business contract stapled to it. And I need y'all to notice something right here at the top, because it is the key to this entire story. From day one, every ounce of pain this woman produced was immediately converted into product. The tooth was product. The fights were product. The tears were product. There was never a version of this where somebody in the room said, maybe we should turn the cameras off and get this girl some help, because help does not have a monetization strategy. Remember that, because we are going to come back to it. And here is a detail that tells you exactly how the Chrisean Rock legend was built. Within months of that tooth incident, the missing tooth was not a source of shame. It was the marketing. Blogs led with it. Thumbnails zoomed in on it. Chrisean Rock herself leaned into it, joked about it, rapped about it, because she had already learned the first rule of the economy she was now living in. If they're going to stare anyway, charge them for the view. That instinct, that scrappy, brilliant, self-destructive instinct, is the engine of everything that follows. It made her famous. It also made her a prisoner of the very spectacle she was selling. And look at what happened next, because the escalation was immediate and it was relentless. The two of them spent the next 3 years turning private dysfunction into public spectacle. The screaming matches on Instagram live, broadcast to millions. The physical altercations in cars, in parking lots, on sidewalks, with bystanders filming every second. The time she allegedly took his car and drove it clear across the country until Oklahoma authorities arrested her. And she caught 2 felony charges, possession of a controlled dangerous substance with intent to distribute, and possession without the proper tax stamp, a case that would hang over her head for years afterward. His manager went public claiming she had stolen money and broken into his home. She addressed it from behind bars, said she had been tweaking, said she was using the time to heal, and within months she was arrested again, this time in New Orleans, on an out-of-state warrant. A woman self-diagnosing her own spiral from a jail phone, while the blogs quoted her like a press release. Then May of 2022 delivered a double feature that should have ended everything. Blueface's mother appeared on camera with a visibly swollen face, claiming Chrisean Rock had attacked her. And days later, surveillance footage from a Baltimore hotel captured an all-out brawl involving Blueface and her own father, with the footage appearing to show her father swinging first before the rapper fought back. Let me repeat that, slowly. Her boyfriend and her father, fighting in a hotel, on camera, for the internet. She later tried to explain that her relationship with her father had been complicated for years because of old family trauma, which tells you everything about the foundation underneath this woman. The two most important men in her life, throwing hands in a hallway, and her stuck in the middle of a collision that had been building since before she was born. And in October of that same year, she got on live with visible injuries and told the world Blueface had put his hands on her during an argument in a car, then walked the entire claim back a day later, said she had been drinking, said he was actually stopping her from jumping out onto the highway. Sit with that pattern, because it repeats like a drumbeat through this entire saga. Explosion, accusation, retraction, reunion. Every single time. And every single time, the views went up, the blogs posted, the channels monetized, and somebody somewhere got paid. The retraction did not trend the way the accusation did. It never does. The correction never catches the headline, and both of them knew it, and the cycle kept spinning because the cycle was the business. And notice who absorbed the damage every single time. When Blueface embarrassed her publicly, the internet called him a player and moved on. When Chrisean Rock exploded publicly, the internet called her crazy and kept the clip in rotation for months. Same chaos, two completely different sentences. He gotta be the entertainer. She gotta be the entertainment. That double standard is not an excuse for anything she did, but it is the water she was swimming in, and we are going to name it every time it shows up. Because while the relationship was burning, the business was booming, and this is where the story stops being about one dysfunctional couple and starts being about a machine. In June of 2022, the Zeus network cast Chrisean Rock in Baddies, and Baddies took everything chaotic about her and made it the franchise. The fights with castmates like Persuasion and Raleigh. The screaming. The hair trigger unpredictability. The confessionals where she would cry 1 minute and swing the next. All of it repackaged as personality. All of it monetized by the episode. All of it clipped and recycled across every platform on Earth. Then Zeus went further and built an entire spin-off around the couple, Crazy in Love, premiering in December of 2022, literally selling the dysfunction back to the audience in real time. The fights, the breakups, the reconciliations, the family drama, cameras rolling through every bit of it. There was no off switch. There was no private life. There was only the feed. Now here's where it gets crazy. Years later, Chrisean Rock would go live and call that very network demonic. She claimed producers staged the fights. She claimed they deliberately pitted her against people for ratings. She claimed they owed her money and threatened to sue them over it. She said she walked away from that set when they tried to force her into yet another fight she did not want. Zeus's CEO, Lemuel Plummer, fired back publicly with receipts about what she had been paid, with figures floating around $170,000. And suddenly the victim narrative and the business records were staring at each other across a very ugly table. Was she exploited, or did she cash in on the exploitation? Both things can live in the same contract, and that is exactly the uncomfortable space this whole industry operates in. A network does not have to invent the fire. It only has to make sure the fire never goes out, and then sell tickets to the burning. And meanwhile, her own sister, Taseki, stayed inside the Zeus orbit and kept fighting on camera, most recently losing a widely streamed bout against Big Lex while Chrisean Rock reportedly sat there crying as she watched it happen. Think about that image for a second. One sister still inside the machine, bleeding for it, and the other sister outside the machine, crying for her, while the same audience pays to watch both. And here is the question that should keep every executive at that network up at night. If your star tells the world your set is demonic, that your producers stage the violence, that your checks do not clear, and your response is to post her payment history, what exactly are you defending? Not the talent's well-being. Not the truth. The business. It is always the business. Two daughters of the same West Baltimore chaos, and the only two paths the industry offered them were swinging and watching. Somebody is lying about how that machine works, and the truth is probably uglier than either side's version. And let me pause here and say the quiet part out loud, because nobody in this ecosystem wants to say it. Every platform that touched Chrisean Rock made money off the version of her that was bleeding and invested nothing in the version of her that needed help. Not the mansion that cast her, not the label that signed her, not the network that franchised her, and not the audience, us, that tuned in weekly like it was appointment television. When the check cleared, everybody was family. When the handcuffs clicked, everybody was a stranger. Keep that in your pocket for the verdict at the end of this video. And through this entire stretch, do not forget, the woman was also trying to have a music career. She gave us Vibe, which racked up real numbers and proved she could hold a record. In 2023, she dropped Mr. Take Ya Bitch, a track literally built out of her love triangle drama, and it charted straight into the culture's conversation. Even her art was the drama. There was no separation between the life and the content, and that was by design. When your trauma is your marketing plan, you can never afford to heal, because healed does not sell. Then came the moment that should have changed everything. January 2023. Chrisean Rock announced she was pregnant. And instead of a celebration, the internet got a paternity war. Blueface publicly denied the child was his, demanded a DNA test, accused her of being with other men, and turned what should have been the most private season of her life into a months-long public referendum. She later said his reaction came from jealousy after she took a trip home to Baltimore without telling him. And honestly, where does the truth even live between these two? She gave birth to her son on September 3rd of 2023, and she live-streamed parts of the delivery. Live-streamed it. A child entered this world with a chat box attached. His name is Chrisean Jesus Malone Jr., and from his very first breath, he was content. Blueface was not in the room. He was on social media, criticizing her parenting in real time and threatening to pursue custody if she did not prioritize the baby. A newborn, hours old, already the subject of a public custody threat. And the audience ate it up, because by then we had all been trained to treat this woman's life like a season of television that never goes on hiatus. And understand what that birth livestream really was, because it was not just oversharing. It was the logical endpoint of 6 years of training. When every private moment of your adult life has been packaged and sold, of course you stream the delivery room. To Chrisean Rock, privacy was never the default. Privacy was the anomaly. The feed was the family. The chat was the waiting room. And a baby boy took his first breath in front of an audience that had already decided what kind of mother she was going to be. Now I want to be very careful here, because this is the part of the story where the gossip pages and the T channels completely lose their minds, and I am not going to do that. Here is what is documented. Months after the birth, Blueface claimed he had secretly obtained a DNA test proving he was not the father, posted about it publicly, called the whole situation bittersweet, and Chrisean Rock fired back that she had deliberately kept him off the birth certificate so she would maintain full control of her son. As the boy got older, the internet began dissecting every single video of him, frame by frame, speculating about his development, diagnosing a toddler from their couches, and channels started running wild with claims from so-called insiders, church members, former friends, anybody willing to talk into a microphone. In recent days, reports have circulated that Child Protective Services has opened an investigation, and the commentary sphere reacted to that news like it was a season finale twist. None of that is entertainment. That is a real child, a little boy who did not choose a single frame of this life. And whatever concerns exist about his well-being deserve professionals, not panel shows. What I will say is this. When you build a career out of broadcasting your chaos, you do not get to act surprised when the chaos becomes evidence. The camera that made Chrisean Rock famous is the same camera that documents everything she would rather the world forget. And that contradiction sits at the dead center of this entire saga. And while we are here, let's talk about the cottage industry that grew up around this child, because it deserves daylight. Within the commentary world, entire channels now run on a weekly cadence of Chrisean Rock coverage, and the formula is always the same. A breathless title about betrayal or exposure, a clip of her at her worst, and a verdict delivered with total confidence by somebody who has never met her. Some of that coverage is genuine concern. A lot of it is arithmetic. Concern does not require a thumbnail with a red arrow. The day the audience stops clicking is the day the concern evaporates, and everybody in that ecosystem knows it. Because while all of this was unfolding, the legal avalanche never stopped moving. And this is the part the meme pages skip, because it requires reading. So let's read it together, line by line. May 2020, Maryland. Marijuana and drug paraphernalia charges, the small beginning. February 2022, Oklahoma. The 2 felony counts from that cross-country drive, the case that would not die. March 2023. She took a deal for years of probation and 120 hours of community service. August 2022, Arizona. Disorderly conduct and criminal trespassing. The trespassing charge later dismissed. August 2023, Baltimore. Second-degree assault. January 2024, Los Angeles. 2 misdemeanor counts. Assault with a deadly weapon and battery. Connected to an incident backstage at an award show where singer James Wright Chanel says she attacked him and hurled a homophobic slur, an allegation that also became a civil lawsuit filed against her, a lawsuit still hanging out there with serious potential consequences. Her former stylist sued her too, alleging assault and battery. That is 5 separate years and 5 separate jurisdictions, a paper trail that reads like a court calendar. And read that list again with fresh eyes, because there is a pattern hiding inside it that nobody talks about. Nearly every legal episode in the Chrisean Rock file is downstream of a relationship, a set, or a scene that somebody else designed and somebody else profited from. That does not erase accountability, not one bit. Grown people make grown choices. But it does tell you that the chaos was never random. It was routed. It had a schedule, a call time, and a payout structure. And then came June of 2024, the moment that should be studied in every media ethics class in America. Chrisean Rock showed up to a courthouse in the San Fernando Valley to support Blueface at his hearing, with her infant son in her arms, and officers were waiting for her. They had anticipated her arrival. They arrested her on the spot over a fugitive warrant connected to the Oklahoma case, took her into custody in front of everybody, and shipped her back to face the music. She sat for roughly 3 months before walking free that September, and the very first thing she did was go live, telling the world how grateful she was to be out, how glad she was to hold her baby again. And the internet welcomed her home like a returning character, because that is what she had become. Not a person, a character, a franchise, a recurring role in a show none of us remember subscribing to. And let me tell you what that arrest image really captured, because the internet memed it within the hour and missed the entire story. A mother showed up to support the father of her child, knowing there was a chance the law was waiting for her, and she brought the baby anyway. You can read that as recklessness, and plenty of people did. But you can also read it as the purest distillation of who Chrisean Rock has always been. Loyal to a fault, allergic to hiding, and physically incapable of choosing the quiet, safe option even when the quiet, safe option is standing right there. The same impulse that made her a star is the impulse that keeps putting her in handcuffs. You would think 3 months in a cell would be the bottom. It was not. Fast forward to this year, 2026. In February, she allegedly blew off a court hearing. By late March, a judge had issued a bench warrant for her arrest, and for weeks it just sat there, active, hanging over her head, while she kept posting, kept streaming, kept living her entire life in public like the paper did not exist. She eventually addressed it herself, in her own way, on her own live stream, because of course she did, because that is the only language this ecosystem speaks. And then, on August 9th of this year, police in San Diego pulled over a car, and inside that car were Blueface and Chrisean Rock, together again, with their son, on some random night out, years after the breakups, the accusations, the DNA wars, the face tattoo, the extradition. Neither of them was arrested over the stop itself, and police made no public statement about it. But the footage hit the internet anyway, because of course it did, because even a routine traffic stop becomes a season premiere when these two are in the frame. But let that image sit in your mind. The man she once accused of beating her. The man who denied her child to the entire internet. The man whose mugshot she inked into her own skin in January of 2024, a tattoo stretching from her temple down to her jawline. One of the most dramatic public displays of loyalty this culture has ever seen, and the same tattoo she started paying to have lasered off in December of 2025 as part of what she called her healing journey. Back in the same car, with the baby, in 2026. Make it make sense, because I cannot. And here is the detail that ties the whole 8 years together in one knot. Every era of Chrisean Rock's public life ends the same way, with a declaration that it is over, that she is done, that she is healed, that she is moving on. And every era restarts the same way, with a camera, a comment section, and a gravitational pull back toward the same man, the same network, the same cycle. The tattoo gets lasered off, and the bond stays on. The warrants stack up, and the live streams never stop. That is not a storyline anymore. That is a loop, and loops like that do not end with a season finale. They end with an intervention, or they end badly. And baby, the streets had plenty to say, because the timing is nothing short of diabolical. Blueface came home from prison, after serving over a year, and immediately reignited the triangle that built both of their careers. On one side, Jaden Alexis, the mother of his older children, never fully out of the picture, never fully quiet, a woman who has been in this rotation since the very beginning. On the other side, a new girlfriend, Nevaeh, who just gave birth to his child, and who, according to wall-to-wall coverage across the T channels, was already catching heat from Chrisean Rock within days of delivering, barely out of the hospital before the smoke found her. There was even chatter about a baby shower getting shot up, with fingers pointed in very familiar directions. Though let me be clear, Nothing has been proven and nobody has been charged in connection with that. Then, just days ago, a viral street fight involving Chrisean Rock lit up every timeline on the internet, and the woman on the other end of it came forward showing her face to the cameras, insisting she walked away without a scratch, telling her side to anybody who would listen, because in this economy, even the bystanders know their 15 minutes when they see them. And notice how fast the machine absorbed that fight. Within hours, there were breakdowns, reaction videos, live panels, and monetized hot takes. And somewhere in the middle of all that content was a real altercation between real women with real consequences. And none of that mattered, because the content was the point. The content is always the point. Chrisean Rock could sneeze on a Tuesday, and it would be a 3-part docuseries by Friday. And that is not a joke. That is the business model. And through all of it, every bit of it, Chrisean Rock went live and said she does not want to beef with Blueface, because, in her own words, she still loves him. Still, after the tooth, after the car, after the courthouse, after the cell, after the warrant. Still, this is a woman who once stood on the internet and said the two of them were bigger than Jay-Z and Beyonce. And the tragedy is that in her mind, that was not a joke. That was a dream she genuinely believed she was living. And maybe that is the cruelest part of all. She was never playing a character. The character was playing her. And I want to sit in this moment for a second because it explains everything that came before it. Trauma bonds do not respond to logic, to warrants, to DNA tests, or to public humiliation. They respond to intensity. And nobody on this planet generates intensity around Chrisean Rock like Blueface does. Every return to him is not a plot twist. It is a relapse. And we should talk about it that way. Because when you frame it as gossip, you miss the addiction. And when you see the addiction, the whole timeline stops looking like comedy and starts looking like what it actually is, a slow-motion emergency with a subscriber count. Now, if you are waiting for the redemption chapter, it exists. And that is exactly what makes this story so hard to file away. In April of 2024, Chrisean Rock announced she was joining a women's professional football team, the Cali War, as a running back, and she actually suited up and played her first game that May, which means the athlete from Baltimore never fully died. She just got buried under the noise. In March of 2025, she stood in front of a congregation and performed a gospel song called Yahweh for the very first time. And the same internet that had spent years laughing at her suddenly did not know whether to applaud or keep clowning. So it did both. She talked about God. She talked about healing. She started erasing the tattoo. She kept insisting, in live stream after live stream, that she was changing, that she wanted peace, that she was tired of the cycle. And every single time she takes one step toward the light, the gravity of the machine drags her 2 steps back into the mud, because the mud is what pays, the mud is what trends, and the mud is what the audience has been trained to expect from her. That is the real villain of this story, and it is not Blueface, and it is not Zeus, and honestly, it is not even Chrisean Rock herself. It is the incentive structure. It is the economy that rewards her worst day more than her best one. A gospel performance gets a fraction of the views that a parking lot fight gets. A football highlight gets a fraction of the views that an arrest gets. The uncomfortable truth is that a calm, healed, boring Chrisean Rock is worthless to the algorithm. Everybody around her knows it, and some part of her knows it too, and I believe some part of her hates it. And do not miss what that means for everybody orbiting her. Her team, her family, her friends, her enemies, every single one of them has a financial reason to keep her exactly where she is. A healthy Chrisean Rock is a closed tab. A spiraling Chrisean Rock is a revenue stream. When your crisis is somebody else's salary, nobody in the room has an incentive to call the ambulance. And that, more than any man, any network, or any warrant, is the trap she has never escaped. And before anybody types it, yes, I hear the counterargument. She is grown. She signs the contracts. She throws the hands. She picks up the phone and goes live all by herself. All true. Nobody staged her temper, and nobody forged the police reports. But accountability and exploitation are not opposites. In this story, they are roommates. A person can be fully responsible for her choices and fully surrounded by people profiting from her worst ones at the exact same time. And if we cannot hold both of those truths, we are not analyzing this story, we are just picking a jersey. And let's be honest about the moments that built the meme, because they matter to how we got here. For years, the internet's relationship with Chrisean Rock was a highlight reel of bewilderment. The clip of her eating a rose on camera while the people around her begged her to spit it out. The clip of a hole punched in a wall being waved off because somebody rich could fix it. The endless loop of crash outs that made her the punchline of every group chat in America. The framing was always the same. Look at this. Can you believe her? What is wrong with her? And underneath every one of those clips was a woman whose behavior was being read as comedy while it was broadcasting something else entirely. When somebody's chaos is consistent, documented, and monetized for half a decade, at some point the laughter stops being a reaction and starts being a symptom. We were not watching a clown. We were watching a signal flare, and we kept rating it 5 stars. And zoom out for one more beat, because the rose clip and the wall clip were never just random moments. They were the exact content the ecosystem was starving for. Unscripted, unguarded, unwell. A polished, guarded, media-trained Chrisean Rock would have been useless to that machine, and the machine knew it, which is why nobody around her ever seriously pushed her toward becoming one. Her rawness was not an obstacle to the business. Her rawness was the business. So where does that leave us, right now? In August of 2026? It leaves us with a 26-year-old woman carrying an active bench warrant situation, a child at the center of a reported CPS investigation, a viral street fight she may or may not have started, a man she cannot quit who just had a brand new baby with somebody else, a sister still swinging fists for the same network she calls demonic, a gospel song sitting quietly in her catalog, a football helmet collecting dust somewhere, and an entire internet that cannot decide whether she is the predator, the victim, or the product. And here is my honest read, and y'all know I do not sugarcoat on this channel. Chrisean Rock is all three. She has done real harm to real people with her own hands, and the lawsuits and the charges are not rumors. They are public records, and every victim in those filings deserves to be taken seriously. She has also been harmed by a childhood that failed her before she could walk, by a man who monetized her devotion, by a network that turned her breakdowns into a business model, and by millions of us, yes us, who clicked every single time, who clipped every meltdown, who made her pay in our primetime programming. Both things are true at once, and anybody telling you it is simpler than that is selling you something, probably a 60-minute live stream with a donate button. And for everybody watching who grew up in a house like hers, who knows what it means to be raised by survival, you already understand something the comment section never will. You can be the fastest person on the track and still be running from something. Chrisean Rock has been running since West Baltimore, and every camera she ever stood in front of just made the chase louder. The question was never whether Chrisean Rock can be saved. The question is whether the internet would even allow it, because her redemption does not trend and her destruction pays in full. And until that equation changes, until the audience stops rewarding the crash and starving the comeback, the cycle will keep spinning, the cameras will keep rolling, and that little boy will keep growing up inside a story he never agreed to be part of. Mark my words, something in this situation has to break, and I pray to God it is not that child's future that does the breaking. Because here is the final truth, and then I am going to let y'all have the floor. Every era of this saga, the mansion, the network, the courtrooms, the live streams, the baby, the warrant, the San Diego stop, they are not separate stories. They are one story, told in chapters, about what happens when a system discovers that a woman's pain is more profitable than her peace, and then builds an entire economy around making sure she never finds the peace. The tooth grew back, in a sense, when she finally fixed the smile. The tattoo is fading under the laser. But the machine is still standing, still hungry, still waiting for the next clip. And the only way this ends differently is if the audience, us, decides that the comeback is finally worth more than the crash. And one more thing before I hand this to y'all, because it needs to be said plainly. Whatever you believe about Chrisean Rock, whatever verdict you bring to these comments, leave the child out of the crossfire. He did not audition. He did not sign. He is the only person in this entire saga with zero agency and the most to lose. And the way this story treats him over the next few years will say more about us than it ever says about her. Chrisean Rock got to choose the spotlight, however messy that choice was. He did not. And someday he is going to be old enough to search his own name. And what he finds will be everything we just walked through. Every clip, every comment, every verdict, preserved forever. That is the inheritance this machine builds for the children inside it. Now sound off in the comments, because I genuinely need to hear where y'all land on this one. Number 1. Is Chrisean Rock a product of her environment who deserves grace, or a grown woman fully accountable for every crash out, or is the honest answer both? Number 2. Should her son be with family while she gets herself together, yes or no? And number 3. Did Zeus exploit a vulnerable girl, or did she sign the deal and cash the checks with her eyes wide open? Pick a side, bring your receipts, and be respectful about that baby, because he cannot defend himself. And if you think this saga is anywhere close to over, you have not been paying attention, because with that warrant still floating out there, the street fight fallout still unfolding, and Blueface new baby fresh on the timeline, the next chapter is already writing itself. I will be covering every single development the second it drops, so make sure you are subscribed with notifications on, Go watch my breakdown of the Blueface and Nevaeh situation next if you missed it, and I will talk to y'all later.